picking them off and stealing the women and children as well. So it was a really horrendous time for the people.
Captain Joseph Birney of the 1st Cavalry wrote on April 8, 1864, "I lost 15 Indians on the road, principally boys, 3 of which were stolen by the inhabitants of the towns through which I had passed. 2 strayed from my camp on the Rio Pecos, and 10 died from the effects of the cold."
And the women, they tell stories about the pregnant women and the elders who couldn't keep up were taken out of line and shot by the soldiers. Women were raped and violated. And so this was a very, very traumatic time for my people, and we still haven't forgotten it. It's still very much a part of our memories.
These were men who had probably served in previous expeditions against the Navajos. Their families had been involved in warfare with the Navajos in decades prior to Carson's Scorched Earth campaign. They were more racially motivated to inflict punishment upon on the Navajos.
The military underestimated the large number of Navajos. Captain Francis McCabe of the 1st New Mexico Cavalry wrote on May 12, 1864, "I placed as many of the women, children, and old people as possible in wagons, and had 1 empty wagon placed every morning under control of the officer of the day for the purpose of traveling with the guard to receive such sick and aged Indians as might have given out on the march. On the 2nd day's march, a very severe snowstorm set in, which lasted for 4 days with unusual severity and occasioned great suffering amongst the Indians, many of whom were nearly naked and of course unable to withstand such a storm. I left Fort Canby with 800 and received 146 en route to Fort Sumner, making about 946 in all. Of this number, about 110 died. 25 were enticed away."
I was just reading an account of one military commander who was so relentless in getting the people there that he was driving them 20 miles a day, and that when he got there, a substantial number of the people had died because of his relentless and determination to get them to the reservation.
Navajos didn't know how to cook coffee and flour.
They
survived. That was the main thing.
We had such a long distance to cover. Some old people fell behind, and they wouldn't let us go back to help them. It was the saddest thing to see. My heart hurt so to remember that. 2 women were near the time of the births of their babies, and they had a hard time keeping up with the rest. Some army men pulled them behind a huge rock, and we screamed out loud when we heard the gunshots. The women didn't make a sound, but we cried out loud for them and their babies. I felt then I would not live through everything.
The marches crossed 3 rivers to reach Bosque Redondo.
When we crossed the Rio Grande, many people drowned. We didn't know how to swim. There was hardly any water deep enough to swim in at home. Some babies, children, and some of the older men and women were swept away by the river current. We must not ever forget their screams and the last we saw of them. Hands, a leg, or strands of hair floating. There were many who died on the way to Huelta. All the way we told each other, we will be strong as long as we are together. I think that was what kept us alive.
The Rio Puerco was shallow with still, brackish water. The Rio Grande was sometimes frozen. Severe, cracked land seemed endless. The Pecos River was the last significant crossing before reaching Bosque Redondo.
And
I think that if you know you hadn't done wrong, you have this identity that is strong.
Pivotal events were happening in the American West. Colonel John Shivington led soldiers from Fort Lyon, Colorado on November 29, 1864. Shivington's destination was the camp of Black Kettle. A group of Cheyenne and Arapaho were camped along Sand Creek. The Sand Creek Massacre ensued. More than 150 men, women, and children were reported killed, with approximately 15 military dead. Over 8,000 Navajos went on the Long Walk.
There's really no way to know how many people died on the Long Walk. One of the estimate that's mostly used is around 2,500 people died. Over 8,000 were imprisoned at